Hi, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. This podcast of the People's Pharmacy is brought to you by Squatty Potty Toilet Stools. They create healthy toilet posture for fast, easy elimination. Learn more about toilet posture and health at squattypotty.com. That's SQUATTYPOTTY.com.
Are you hoping to eat healthy food, lose weight, and exercise more in 2016? How are you going to implement those resolutions? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Many of us start a new year with lots of good intentions. How can we turn those resolutions into lasting habits? Last week, Gretchen Rubin suggested some strategies. Today, Dr. Wendy Wood discusses her research on how people break bad habits and learn how to adopt better ones.
We'd also like to hear from you. How have you managed to make healthy habits part of your routine? Give us a call at 888-472-3366.
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, better habits for the new year with your calls and questions.
First, the news.
In the People's Pharmacy Health Headlines, aspirin may protect men with prostate cancer from dying from the disease. The Physicians' Health Study involves more than 22,000 male doctors who have been followed for almost 3 decades. Over that time, 3,193 were diagnosed with prostate cancer. Those who took aspirin at least 3 times a week were 1/4 less likely to be diagnosed with metastatic tumors. They were 39% less likely to die from prostate cancer compared to those men who were not regular aspirin users. Although aspirin did not apparently prevent the development of prostate cancer in the first place, it seemed to make the disease less aggressive. One theory to explain this effect is the antiplatelet action of aspirin. This mechanism prevents blood clots from forming and may also make it harder for prostate cancer cells to migrate to bones. This is not the first time aspirin has been shown to have anti-cancer activity. Other studies suggest that regular aspirin use may help prevent cancers of the colon, rectum, esophagus, breast, stomach, and lung. A word of caution is warranted. Aspirin can interact with many other medications, and it can be quite irritating to the digestive tract and can trigger ulcers. No one should undertake long-term aspirin use without medical supervision.
Researchers have been debating the respective roles of genetics and environment on cancer for decades. A new study of Scandinavian twins suggests that overall about 1/3 of cancers may be attributed to genetics. Over 200,000 identical and fraternal twins participated in the study. The average follow-up was over 3 decades. The differences between the cancer rates of fraternal and identical twins gave the scientists a way to tease out how much of the risk was hereditary. For certain malignancies, such as testicular cancer or melanoma, the genetic component is especially strong. If one man developed testicular cancer, his fraternal twin was 12 times more likely than an unrelated person to develop this cancer. The risk skyrocketed to 28 times higher in an identical twin. In the case of melanoma, the incidence in the general population is roughly 1%. If, on the other hand, an identical twin developed melanoma, the other twin was at a 20% risk of also coming down with this life-threatening skin cancer. Other cancers that may have a familial component include those of the prostate, breast, uterus, and ovaries.
Previous research has indicated that older people with too little vitamin D in their systems are more susceptible to falls and fractures. A new study shows, however, that high-dose vitamin D supplements don't seem to prevent falls or broken bones. In fact, the groups getting the most vitamin D had more falls and injuries. The research involved 200 Swiss seniors at least 70 years old at the beginning of the study. It lasted for 1 year, during which one group was given 24,000 international units of vitamin D3 a month. Another group got the high dose, 60,000 international units of vitamin D3 once a month, and a third group got 24,000 international units plus additional calcifediol. the active form of the vitamin D hormone. During the year, about 60% of the volunteers took a tumble, but contrary to expectation, those in the low-dose vitamin D group were the least likely to fall. Fewer than half of them fell, compared to more than two-thirds of those in each high-dose group. The investigators concluded that their results support low-dose vitamin D supplementation, but could not determine that even low-dose vitamin D supplements are better than placebo.
Surgeons have found that plastic mesh can make certain pelvic repairs much easier. But over the last several years, the FDA has become aware that these devices may lead to serious complications, including organ perforation, urinary difficulties, and excessive bleeding. When used for pelvic organ prolapse, transvaginal mesh can contribute to infection, nerve damage, and bleeding. The FDA has just announced that surgical mesh will be reclassified as high-risk devices. Manufacturers will now have to submit safety data that until now has not been required. And that's the health news from the People's Pharmacy this week.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon. I'm a medical anthropologist.
And I'm Joe Graydon. I'm a pharmacologist. We hope 2016 is off to a great start for you and your New Year's resolutions are attainable. Last week, we interviewed Gretchen Rubin about her book, Better Than Before. She described how forming the right habits can help us lead healthier, happier lives.
Have you had success getting rid of a bad habit or embracing one that's good for you? How did you do it? We'd like to hear your story. The number to call to join the conversation is 888-472-3366. You can also send us email, radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or get a message to us by way of Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy.
Today we're talking with Dr. Wendy Wood. She's Provost Professor of Psychology and Business at the University of Southern California. Her research addresses the ways that habits guide behavior and why they're so difficult to break. According to Dr. Wood, our habits run deep, very deep, in fact. In our daily lives, habits make up 40% of our daily activities.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Wendy Wood.
Well, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Dr. Wood, how in the world did you get interested in studying people's habits?
Well, I study the cognitive and the neurological bases behind habit formation and habit change because we know very little at this point about why it is that habits are sticky, why they are difficult to change, and how people go about forming habits. And that's what my research addresses. I got involved in it because I'm interested in behavior. I mean, we all are interested in meeting goals in our lives. We're interested in achieving the things that are important to us. And many of these involve sustained behavior. So some things you can do, like you can send your mom flowers and make her happy once. But there are many things that we do that require repeated behaviors. So to eat a healthy diet, you have to make a decision not just to have a salad at lunch today. Well, that's going to help, but not a whole lot. Or going to the gym once this afternoon. That, again, will help a little, but not a lot. The real benefit comes from when you repeat a behavior over and over, and so you adopt a certain lifestyle. And that's what I'm interested in, is how do people do that? How are people successful at adopting healthy lifestyles?
So what are habits?
Habits are the product of learning. It's a very basic learning process where you repeat a behavior over and over again in a specific context. And over time, you sort of form these shorthand associations between the context that you're in and the behavior you're performing. Now, rewards are also very important in this process because people only repeat behaviors that are working for them, behaviors that are generating some positive outcome. So we're particularly likely to repeat behaviors that are rewarded. There's also a secondary benefit to reward, which is that there's some evidence that reward helps to stamp in or cement the mental and neural processes involved in these context response associations. So the short answer is they're just simple associations. I get in my car, I stick the key in the ignition, and you don't have to think about them. That's the critical thing, is they become so automatic that you may not even be able to tell me what you do what is the first behavior that you do when you get into the car. It's so automatic, you just do it. And that's why I say that these are like shortcuts. They help us get through the day without having to make decisions.
Well, at some point, what you were talking about sounds a little like Pavlov's dog.
Well, that's another associative process. Absolutely. This is an associative process that involves your response and a reward, and then the cue becomes associated with your response. Pavlov's dog is a slightly different conditioning process, but it's the logic is just the same. You're right.
Let me tell you about one of my really, really bad habits. And it took a long time for me to break it. So when I travel, and I used to travel a whole lot, I'd be on an airplane every other week or so. At least that's the way it seemed. And when there was a delay, weather problem, mechanical issue, whatever it may have been, I would get very stressed out because I needed to be at my next location. When I was supposed to arrive, somebody was waiting for me. I had things that I had to do. And so there I was, stuck in the waiting lounge of the airport and feeling awful.
And this is before cell phones, so you couldn't call the person to say, I'm going to be delayed.
Exactly. So the habit I got into was, are you ready? Good and plenty.
Okay.
I mean, it was like, I'm stuck here. I'm feeling stressed. I'm unhappy. I'm going to be late. I deserve something nice to carry me over. And boom, it was the good and plenty. And, I would do this over and over and over again. And it made me feel bad because after eating the whole box, I usually would say, I'm just going to have a few. And then a few more. And then pretty soon, the box was gone. And, within about 15 or 20 minutes, I was going, I don't feel so good. So eventually it was like, okay, I figured this out. I don't feel good. Why do I keep doing this stupid thing? Why has this become such a habit? And I was eventually able to break that habit.
The fact that you weren't traveling as much anymore made a big difference, I think, in breaking it.
That probably helped, too. So
Yep.
Does that count?
Oh, it sure does. There's several things about that description that fit the habit model so well. Good and plenties are a great reinforcement. They are sweet, they taste good, that licorice, they crunch, all kinds of good things go on. So the first couple of times that you did that, you probably felt pretty good right afterwards. And then, of course, the sugar high sets in and your stomach gets upset or whatever. But the immediate was probably pretty good. The immediate experience, and it was a clear context. So you did it when planes were late in the airport, you were waiting, you were anxious. There's all kinds of really unique cues associated with it, so it's no wonder you formed a habit to do that. And it is one of the things that we found is that people repeat habits long after they experience the reward. And let me explain that to you. We did a study in a campus movie theater where we gave people popcorn we had them watching movie trailers for us, and we gave them popcorn to say thank you. Now, half of the participants got fresh popcorn, and half got stale popcorn. And this was really stale popcorn. It had sat in my lab in a plastic bag for a week. And then we fed it to people. And the people who got stale popcorn, they could tell us that they didn't like it. I mean, it was really pretty awful. It was way down at the end of the scale when we asked them how much they liked it. But if they had habits to eat popcorn at the movie theaters, they ate it anyway. So it was as if the behavior was being cued, even though it wasn't pleasant and fun anymore, just because, and that's that context response association, right? So you're in the context, you do the response, and then later on you might think about whether you really wanted to do it or not. But you're not actually in the moment paying a whole lot of attention to what you're doing, and you're not thinking much about it. So it tends to repeat. And that's sort of prototypic. That's very typical of a habitual response. Now, the fact that you were able to stop and that it actually, you stopping apparently had something to do with not getting stuck quite so often makes a lot of sense too, because you broke that context so that you weren't putting yourself in that situation again. And that allowed you to change the behavior.
Can you tell us, please, a little bit about the pros and cons of habits, both good and bad habits?
Yeah, so the real difference between good and bad habits is whether they're consistent with your goals, right? So good habits are things that are working for you, things that you want to do, and bad habits are things that are not working for you. But the basic automaticity mechanism, the underlying cognitive and neural mechanisms are quite similar.
You're listening to Dr. Wendy Wood, Provost Professor of Psychology and Business at the University of Southern California. She studies how people form and change their habits.
And we'd love to hear from you. How have you managed to trade in a bad habit for a better one? Give us a call, 888-472-3366. You can email us at radio@peoplespharmacy.com or via Twitter. Again, that phone number, 888-472-3366. And Terry, there were some habits in the news this week with regard to the dietary guidelines for Americans.
That's right. And the biggest change in the dietary guidelines, the advice that the government gives us on how to eat better for our health, actually connects to your good and plenties. We're all supposed to eat less sugar.
And we're supposed to cut back on salt. That's nothing new. But guess what? Cholesterol is no longer a problem. It's sugar.
Well, it's not that cholesterol is not a problem, but it's not the main problem.
Exactly. We need to take a short break. When we come back, Dr. Wood will tell us more about how to break habits. For example, eating dessert.
She'll share a personal story on how she formed an exercise habit.
Can willpower be depleted?
Well, it can, and that's why habits that bypass willpower can be so helpful.
Share your own experience with habits at 888-472-3366.
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. If you value the health information you get when you listen to The People's Pharmacy, consider subscribing to our email newsletter. You'll get the latest health news and information on upcoming podcasts delivered to your inbox twice a week. Look for the link at peoplespharmacy.com.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible by Squatty Potty, the original toilet footstool that creates healthy toilet posture. You can learn how squatting relaxes the colon and allows for easier, healthier elimination at squattypotty.com.
And by Red X Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions that moisturize deeply to make dry skin feel soft and smooth. The number is 345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you would like to purchase a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. This is show number 1019. Or you can find it on our website. It's peoplespharmacy.com.
Today we're talking about breaking old bad habits and developing new, healthier ones. We'd love to hear from you. How have you managed to make exercise a part of your regular routine? Have you been able to cut back on sugar? How did you do that?
Well, you can tell us. Just give us a call at 888-472-3366. Send us an email, radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or a message by way of Twitter. We're at People's Pharmacy. If you'd like to join the conversation, the number again, 888-472-3366.
You're listening to Dr. Wendy Wood, Provost Professor of Psychology and Business at the University of Southern California. Her research addresses the ways that habits guide behavior and why they're so difficult to break, as well as evolutionary models of gender differences in behavior. Dr. Wood, I'm guessing that a lot of people want to break bad habits. I mean, they don't tend to think about the good habits that they don't have to think about because they're just part of their routines.
Exactly. We take them for granted.
But the bad habits, it's like, oh, and oftentimes, I hate to say it has to do with food. And so we're feeling stressed and we start munching and we don't even think that that's a habit necessarily. Or, we can't sleep and so we turn on television or whatever. And, I'm sure a lot of people say, I'd really rather go out and take a walk with the dog. But it's so much easier to just, sit here on the couch and read a magazine. So how do we begin to identify the habits that we really want to break, and how do we do it? Because I suspect that's pretty hard.
Well, it is for all of the reasons you mentioned, and certainly eating is something that becomes very habitual for most of us. We eat at certain times of the day, in certain places, with certain people, and there's good evidence that people eat even the same kinds of food at each meal each day. So if you eat a certain thing for breakfast today, you're likely to do that tomorrow. Lunch, dinner, likely to have the same snacks every day. So eating is something that's very habitual. It's hard for us to understand, to identify many of the cues that activate behaviors like eating, because we don't need to be aware of them in order for them to influence our behavior. So it's sort of like sitting in the car not knowing exactly what you do when you start up a car. You also don't know what the cues are when you decide that you're going to eat something. And just like our participants in the movie theater, you might not even like what you're eating anymore if people asked you. But as you say, it's often easier to do that, to just go ahead and eat what you've always eaten and not ask yourself, am I hungry? Is this really the best thing for me? Unfortunately, in our society, the food that is generally available, easy to get, that we see a lot of other people eating, that's advertised to us, is not necessarily the best, most healthy thing. And there's good data that people in the U.S. now know that they should eat, say, 5 or more servings of fruit and vegetables each day. But according to recent data from the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, it's a U.S. government website that people can go on and see the data, that we're actually eating less fruit and vegetables in the last 5 to 10 years than we were before. So even though people know what they should do, their behavior is not following along. And this is one of the challenges with habit, is you tend to develop habits for things that are easy, that are convenient, that are readily available, and those habits perpetuate even though you might know that you should be doing something different.
Dr. Wood, so many of us get used to having dessert after, lunch or dinner, that it becomes like a habit. Hey, what a surprise. And the idea of not having dessert, it's like, whoa, it's not like a meal. It's not completed. But I suspect that a lot of us are full before we even get to dessert, and we could probably learn how to break that habit.
Yes. One of the best things to do is, if you want to break a habit like that, is to substitute another behavior. So you don't have to give up dessert. You could eat fruit instead. You could have coffee or tea instead. And although you have to think about it the first few times you do it, very quickly that will become your new pattern, and that will seem like the right thing to do. So habits are difficult to break, but if you can actually form a healthy habit that replaces the old, then you're in a much better situation because you can then do the new habit automatically, and that becomes the easy, seamless thing to do after lunch or dinner.
Dr. Wood, I'm wondering if you can tell us about a time when perhaps you had a habit you wanted to break. What did you do?
Oh, okay. Well, this is not so much a breaking a habit, it's more forming one. I like to exercise, but when my kids were little, I never had time. And I would always say, okay, I'm going to exercise and when I get home from work. But then I'd always have to take them somewhere, or there'd be something interesting they were doing that I'd much rather do. So I'd end up hanging out with them, and I wouldn't actually go exercise. So I figured out from my schedule, the only real time I could do it is first thing in the morning. And after I kept trying to follow through with exercise routines other times of the day, and it just kept failing, I figured, okay, let me find a time where I know I will have control over my schedule first thing in the morning, and I can go out, run, do an exercise tape, do yoga, whatever it is that I'm going to do that day, and it'll be my time. It was very hard at first to get up a little bit earlier in the morning to do that, but finding the time was only a challenge for the first few weeks. After that, it really did become automatic, so that when I woke up in the morning, it just seemed the right thing to do, exercise. And that continued on for many years. So that was a decision that I had to come to. It was a very tough one, and it's very hard to make those decisions. Not everyone is going to be able to do that, obviously. But we're also busy. If you're serious about exercise, finding some time in the day, finding small ways to insert it into your schedule that are easy, that work best for you, is the way to go. None of us are going to be able to make ourselves do things we hate. So take those off the table already and figure out what is the thing that is easiest and most fun for you to do, and try structuring that into your day. It could be just walking up the stairs to the office at work. That could be the one thing that seems to be working for you that you can repeat. That's the thing to stick with.
Dr. Wood, tell us, please, a little bit about this notion of willpower. I mean, I think there's so many of us who say, I really want to do X, or I really want to stop doing Y. And we think it's just a matter of willpower. If I just try hard enough, tomorrow I'll exercise. Well, tomorrow comes and it's rainy, or tomorrow comes and we're really busy. So we say, well, the day after tomorrow, that's when I'll really start doing this on a regular basis. So how do we convert this willpower thing that we think we have control over, whether it's food or sex or gambling or exercise, and make it either something that aligns with our goals or stops detracting from our goals.
Yeah, you actually do hear people say this when they're not successful at changing their behavior. Oh, it was just too hard. I don't have enough willpower. I couldn't resist whatever the thing is. And it's kind of a funny idea that we all have, that we're so much in control of our behavior. We're really not. Willpower is not very strong. We can use it only for short periods and then we deplete it. It tends to get used up and we don't have that much energy. Instead, one of the interesting things that we are learning from research is that people who are really good at self-control, people who say that they have a lot of willpower, who score high on our willpower scales, they actually are very good at forming habits. So the people who are effectively achieving their goals aren't doing it really through willpower. Instead, they're able to set up their environment so that they can repeat behaviors that are working for them and achieve goals. Now, addiction recovery programs have known this for a while, that if you want to change behavior, you can do it in a variety of ways, but in addition, you change the environment. You don't hang around with people who share a particular addiction if you actually want to be in recovery. You don't go to, say you're a recovering alcoholic, you don't go to bars and hang out in bars, because that makes it hard for you to continue to perform the behaviors that you need to in order to be in recovery. And people who are trying to change any behavior, that's good advice, that they should organize the context that they're in to make the behaviors that they want to engage in easy and ones that they don't want to engage in difficult. And in that way, they're going to form habits that will work for them. There was a fascinating study. People who were going to an all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet. You've probably been to those places, and they serve all kinds of food that's wonderful, some of which is really bad for you, but you are allowed to eat as much as you want. And what these researchers did is they tried to figure out, so how do people with lower BMI handle that kind of a situation? Because clearly they're not succumbing to the all-you-can-eat in the way that people with higher BMI might. So they observed what these lower BMI people are doing. And what they do is they sit with their back to the buffet. So they're controlling what they see, right? They eat with chopsticks, which, at least for Westerners who aren't quite as used to eating with chopsticks, that can slow you down a bit. They put napkins on their lap so they can't just jump up and refill their plate. These are all things that people did in order to control the environment that they were in. So even if you get in situations that are encouraging behaviors that you don't think are good for you, you still can control how you're exposed to the cues in those environments.
And Dr. Wood, it's my job to control acronyms, so we should explain when you say BMI, you're talking about body mass index, which means you are comparing fat people and thin people, right?
Yes, exactly.
Dr. Wendy Wood, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
This was good fun. Thank you much.
You've been listening to Dr. Wendy Wood, Provost Professor of Psychology and Business at the University of Southern California. She studies how people form and change their habits. There are links to her website from peoplespharmacy.com, and you'll find some intriguing links, including a story on NPR titled What Vietnam Taught Us About Breaking Bad Habits, and the New York Times story turning a New Year's resolution into action with the facts.
What strategies have you used to make habits stick? Are there New Year's resolutions you've made in the past that are now part of your everyday life? Share your secrets. Give us a call, 888-472-3366.
And we go to Chris in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. Chris, tell us your story.
Hi, guys. Great show, as usual. So last year, 2014, I lost about 30 pounds and experienced a whole mess of good health benefits from it, particularly less back pain. I had been working out consistently, but never really broke that weight loss barrier, that ceiling that I wanted to break through to attain my goal weight. And then I started taking a food diary and tracking every calorie I ate. I just said, okay, well, we'll just make a goal range of a regular, 18 to 2,200 calorie day. And as soon as I did that, boom, the other 15 pounds of the 30 came off. And I totally agree with the interview. It's contextual. I was deployed overseas at the time in the military, and so the environment was very controlled. It was very different from our easy access to greasy, fat food. I was in a much different environment where if I wanted food, I had to walk almost a mile to the chow hall.
Oh, my.
I just made a rule that I would not keep food in my barracks room. And, well, that was also a pest problem control.
Of course.
But that eliminated my midnight snacking. Even though the chow hall was open from midnight to 1:30 a.m., I had to walk a mile to go midnight snack.
I think if others of us adopted that approach, we would probably lose a lot of weight. Chris, thank you so much. And, we have heard over and over again that food diary strategy that you employed is incredibly effective. Thanks so much for the call, Chris, and congratulations on what you've accomplished. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we'll take your calls on which habits you're glad to be done with and your favorite new healthy habits. Our lines are open at 888-472-3366.
How are you doing with flossing your teeth? How about exercise? How's that working for you?
What about blood pressure? Are you measuring it regularly? Have you figured out a way to keep it under control with and without medicines? Join the conversation. 888-472-3366 or via email, radio@peoplespharmacy.com.
You're listening to the People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
If you like the information you hear when you listen to the People's Pharmacy, you may also enjoy our book published by National Geographic. It's the People's Pharmacy Quick and Handy Home Remedies, available online at peoplespharmacy.com or at your favorite bookstore. Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is made possible in part by Squatty Potty, the original toilet footstool that creates healthy toilet posture. You can learn how squatting relaxes the colon and allows for easier, healthier elimination at squattypotty.com.
And by Redix Industries, makers of utterly smooth creams and lotions, helping dry, cracked skin feel utterly soft and smooth. The number is 800-345-7339. The website is uttercream.com.
If you would like to purchase a CD of this show, you can call 800-732-2334. It's show number 1019, or you can find it on our website, peoplespharmacy.com.
We're exploring the stories behind the health headlines today. Our focus is on how we can improve our health by improving our habits.
If you have a question or a story to share about how you've been able to break a bad habit, you can give us a call, 888-472-3366, or you can send us email, radio@peoplespharmacy.com. And Joe, that is just what Mike did. He says, regarding habits, I have an experience to share. When my wife died after 34 years of marriage, I ended up watching pornography. I won't go into details, but I was spending about 2 hours a day watching. The only way I found to stop was to get an accountability partner. I signed up for an online resource that reported my watching to that individual. I chose a young man to be my accountability partner that I trusted and who looked up to me. So far, it's worked for 4 years.
Oh,
that's a great strategy for stopping that bad habit, Mike.
Absolutely. And we go back to the phones, 888-472-3366. Tim in Raleigh, North Carolina, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What's this about routines?
Hi, Joe and Perry. I think it's interesting that what you're talking about, habits and routines, and I find myself putting certain things in certain pockets always, and I'll walk back across the house or do make tremendous efforts to make sure I go put something back where it needs to go. Otherwise, I know that's going to cause me problems later. And I think about Zuckerberg and people like that just wear like the same shirt, same color shirt, same type thing. They have numerous of them, lots of them, just to eliminate those kinds of hassles of decision making. When I had my 10-year-old daughter 10 years ago, I made a commitment not to eat pork anymore. I was holding her in the delivery room, and I made a commitment through God. I felt like God told me, hey, no more pork. So that was a very easy commitment for me to make, and I've not broke it. And when my 8-year-old daughter was born, I gave up beef. So I found that things like that have just made my life much easier, and commitments are a lot easier when you have faith of some kind in what you're doing.
Thank you so much for your call. We really appreciate it, Tim. And you know, Terry, I used to complain, where are my keys? Where did I put my wallet? Well, I just have this habit now. I always put them in the kitchen drawer, the same place every single time. And as long as I do that, which is 99.5% of the time, I can always find my wallet and my keys.
It really helps a lot. Now, of course, the cell phone is another story because it doesn't have a home.
Where's my cell phone? Well, call it up. That's what I did yesterday. Let's go to Michael in Wichita Falls, Texas. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy.
Hi, thank you. I know you guys are short for time, so I'm a 51-year-old retired Army combat vet. My last deployment was to Afghanistan in 2009. I can't tell you what my specific job was over there. I was a generator mechanic, I'll put it that way. Anyway, I lived on Coca-Colas over there because we did not sleep. Sleep was secondary. Anyway, when I came back home at the end of 2009, I IV'd Coca-Colas, at least 3 liters of Coke a day. And my wife left me a couple years ago, and she has since passed. Anyway, I went through some troubled times. I lost the will to live. I did not get suicidal, but I did not eat. I did not do anything. I soon realized I had to start re-engaging. So what I started eating, even though I wasn't hungry, I just started eating whole foods, a little bit here, a little bit there. I quit drinking Cokes, and I exercise. And I don't go to a gym or anything. All I do the plank. We learned and did that in Afghanistan. In Iraq in the invasion. It's no movement, and it's the best exercise there is. And I do Russian push-ups, and that's all I do.
Michael, can you
yeah.
Tell us on the radio what a plank is and what a Russian push-up is? Because not all of us know.
A plank is you get down on the ground, and you suspend yourself on your toes and your forearms, and you just stay in that position. You do not move.
For how long?
Well, I initially could do it for about little 2.5 minutes, and after that I quit at 20 minutes because the stones get stuck in your arms and stuff.
This really requires strong muscles in the abdomen.
I can do this for about 30 seconds, and if I'm lucky, I may make it to a minute. I can't even conceive of 20 minutes.
What about the Russian push-ups?
It is a regular push-up, but you have your hands put together on the floor in a diamond pattern. Your fingers outline the diamond. When you go down on the push-up, your nose hits the middle of that diamond. That's a Russian push-up.
Thank you.
And at my worst, I couldn't even knock out one initially. I used to could, but now I can do quite a few. I do them. I guess they're inclined, face down, feet in the chair, so to speak. But that's all I do. And I stretch my back. I have a bad back, too.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for sharing your experience. Maybe you'll be an inspiration for others.
Well, I hope so, man. It can be done, okay? It can be done.
Thank you, Michael. Bye-bye.
It doesn't take a lot of work. Bye.
888-472-3366 is the number to call if you've got a story to share. And, Terry, where do we go next?
Well, I've got an email from Anne in Virginia. She says, I had a problem. I bought too much junk food and processed food when I shopped. So I got a solution. I hire a retired person to shop for me. He shops, and I give him a shopping list, and he buys exactly what's on the list, no sugar. And if I shop, I don't shop where there's any quick processed food.
That's kind of a brilliant idea. Outsourcing something that you're going to get into trouble with. And you came up with a really great idea for me. Last week, I shared the fact that I file by pile, and so there's paper everywhere on my desk. But I'm also embarrassed about it. So I don't want anyone to ever see my desk. And you said, well, what we need to do is invite somebody to your office in about 3 weeks, and you'll have a meeting in your office at your desk. Wow. What a motivator. So my desk will be clean in 3 weeks.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Me too. Let's go to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Serenity, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. Tell us your story.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yes, when I was 38, I'm 49 now, but when I was 38, I weighed 246 pounds, and I was miserable. And I joined a program, Food Addicts and Recovery Anonymous, a 12-step program, as the doctor was talking about. And 11 years later, I have been able to maintain a healthy weight of around 133, 34 pounds, which I'm so grateful. And it taught me a different lifestyle, because back then that was what I yearned for. I had done so many diets, so many ways to do this thing, to lose weight. And I kept saying I need a lifestyle change, and I did not know how to go about getting that. So when I joined the program, it helped me to set up healthy habits, including a food journal was mentioned earlier. That was one of the things, and also learning how to have portion control, as in weighing my food, measuring my food. And as far as not grazing throughout the day, but having good, healthy meals, balanced meals every day. I eat very good. And she mentioned also about fruit as my dessert. That's what I eat. I abstain from certain foods. One of them is sugar, which is amazing because I was a sugar addict. But today, I am satisfied with that sugar as far as my sweet tooth goes with my fruit at my dinner. And it's wonderful. Again, some other strategies are like the quiet time that's recommended, to settle my nerves, to settle down, and of course to ask for help from a bigger power. We refer to higher power, and that can be whatever it is for an individual. And also, instead of picking up food and when I get a food craving and which it rarely happens now, it rarely happens into this program, but instead of picking up in a food item, I might make a phone call to one of my fellows or call my sponsor, and and that relieves that, and nothing like taking a walk and instead of picking up something and eating something that I don't need, because today when my body is hungry, it's because it's time for me to eat. Prior to program, I didn't know what hunger was because I ate all the time.
Serenity, this is such a wonderful Oh, a wonderful package of strategies, and thank you so much for sharing it with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Serenity. Bye-bye. All right, let's go to, we have to wait for...
Let's go to Bill.
Okay. Bill,
Bill.
we don't know where you are. Bill, share that, please.
I'm in Cary, North Carolina.
Okay, and what's your restaurant strategy?
Oftentimes when you go to restaurants, you get so much food. So that what I've started doing is when I order, I ask them to bring me a box at the same time they bring me my food. Sometimes they don't do that, and I have to be real insistent. But I take half of the food and put it away immediately and put it in the box and get it out of sight. So that, out of sight, out of mind. And then, I can take it home and I have another meal for another day.
Bill, how did you come up with this secret trick?
I don't know. I just had started changing other habits, and I realized that a lot of times I was just eating because the food was there, and I figured if I got it out of sight. Then,
we've been all told for so long to clean our plates as children. And you can't leave the table until your plate is clean.
Or you can't have dessert.
Or you can't have dessert, right? And I think that probably set us all up for some bad behavior as we got older, and it was no longer an issue. Your idea of, in essence, cleaning your plate by getting rid of half of it into a box before you even start is absolutely brilliant. A lot of us think, okay, if there's anything left over, I'll put it in a box afterwards. But for many of us, it's too late. By then, we've cleaned our plate. So I really love this.
Brilliant.
Bill, this is a brilliant strategy, and I'm gonna try it next time.
All right.
Thank you for your call.
Sure.
Bye-bye.
Joe, we've got an email with a suggestion, perhaps for us. Kate says, I have recently conquered a lifelong habit of clutter all over. Now I look forward to uncluttering. The night before, I write down an area that I want to work on and the time that I can fit it in. And then the next day, I put on a fun apron, I put a timer in my pocket, I set it to start. I work just as long as I want, and then I record the minutes that I've worked on my daily calendar. I love the results. This morning I walked into my study, seeing a clear floor felt so good, and I'm proud of myself. This is terrific. Accountability.
Yes, absolutely. Accountability. For those of us who respond to external cues, accountability is really important.
Or Kate may just be getting that reward by seeing those minutes and seeing that clear floor.
If you'd like to join our conversation, our lines are open at 888-472-3366. You can email us, radio@peoplespharmacy.com, or via Twitter @peoplespharmacy. Again, the phone number, if you've got a secret strategy you'd like to share, 888-472-3366. We go to Tampa, Florida. Rick, welcome to the People's Pharmacy. What's your story?
Hi, Joe and Terry. I found a way to learn new habits by analyzing old habits, routines that I had, and incorporating the new habits into the old routines. For example, what I had was I had a severed tendon on my hand, and I couldn't use some of my fingers, and I like to play the piano and so forth. At any rate, I was in college, and one thing that I did was I had to soak my hand once it got out of this cast to limber it up. And so I did that around times like when I'd watch TV and stuff like that. And also later when I was carrying my book bag with books to my classes, rather than put it on my back, I would hold it with my hand to strengthen my hand. So in essence, the important message I'm trying to convey to all the listeners is that one can sometimes learn and incorporate new habits by doing an analysis of old routines or old habits and incorporating those new habits into the old ones.
Great idea, Rick. And as a matter of fact, that's something I did. I wanted to switch from taking my thyroid medicine in the morning when I had to take it at least half an hour before breakfast and preferably an hour before, to taking it in the evening. And I did that by kind of tying it to my bedtime routine of flossing and brushing and washing my face. So it does help to tie your new habit to an old one.
Rick, thanks so much for the call.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye. And we go to Jason. Hi, Jason. Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. We understand you were successful in quitting smoking?
Yes. Good morning, Terry and Joe. I was very successful with several methods that I tried to put in place because it was a habit that tormented me for so many years. And what I did was I actually got a body cleanse from GNC, and it was a total detox of all toxins within your body. And that was the first step that I took. After that, I had already tried the patches and all that stuff. It hadn't worked. But that body cleanse seemed to truly take away some of the feelings of nicotine withdrawal. And from there, I always had a bottle of water handy, right there by my bed, right there at my workplace, always available to also divert and take the feeling away.
Well, that's a brilliant strategy, Jason. The idea of diverting is really critical, because if you could sip water instead of smoking a cigarette, wow, what a difference that can make. Well, that's just about all the time we have. Terry, I have to say, I'm really happy. That's not always the case, about the new guidelines for dietary habits starting in 2016, and that is cutting back on sugar. You know, I think sugar is the new cholesterol, so people really need to make a difference. And I think a lot of our listeners are beginning to do just that.
Well, as a matter of fact, we have an email that says, I admit to being a sugar addict. Once I start eating it, forget about it. And last year, I decided to give up gluten as an experiment and discovered that once I gave up gluten, the sugar went along with it.
Cool. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for listening to the People's Pharmacy.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Sophie Copeland provided technical assistance. Al Wadarski is the engineer. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
To order today's show, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 1019. That number again, 800-732-2334, or you can find it on our website, peoplespharmacy.com.
And when you go to the site, you can find out, tell us what you think about the show, find information on prescription drugs or home remedies, subscribe to the free podcast of our show or our email newsletter.
In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Be sure to join us next week when we talk with Dr. David Ludwig about how the food we eat affects our metabolism. Why aren't all calories created equal?
We hope you enjoyed this podcast. If so, please consider taking a minute to write a review on iTunes. And thanks for listening to the People's Pharmacy.
We interrupt this program to bring you an important Wayfair message. Wayfair's got style tips for every home. This is Styles McKenzie helping you make those rooms sing. Today's style tip: when it comes to making a statement, treat bold patterns like neutrals. Go wild, like an untamed animal print area rug under a rustic farmhouse table from Wayfair.com. Fierce. This has been your Wayfair style tip to keep those interiors superior.
Wayfair, every style, every home.